Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Laura, and if you're not new here, well, it's been a minute. So, quick catch up. Since my last video, I worked in marketing at Boston College while taking 2 classes per semester in the part-time MBA program. I graduated in May 2025 with my master's in business administration. And then in June, I started working full time for a global management consulting firm in marketing. When I applied to the MBA program, my essay was actually about reselling. I was a full time reseller for about a year and a half. I was really active on YouTube during that period of time. So if you want to learn about my experience, you can go watch all of my old videos. I learned a ton during that period and I made a lot of mistakes. And over the last few years, I've had a lot of time to reflect on what I would do differently if I were to start again today. For my first video back, I want to answer the question, if I started a reselling business today, knowing what I know now, what would I do differently? One quick disclaimer before we jump in. The way that I'm answering this question assumes that I'm interested in growth and scale, not just replacing my income month to month. The first time around, reselling was my primary source of income. I needed it to pay my bills. Maybe many of you relate to that. So, profitability and risk management were my top priorities. If I were starting today, my mindset would be different. I would build with scale in mind from day one, which brings me to my first point. The first thing that I do differently is I would scale my inventory a lot faster. When I first started reselling, I was extremely conservative. I would invest maybe $50. I would list the items. I would sell at least one of them to recoup what I invested, and then I would reinvest those profits. And honestly, that was the right move for me at the time because I needed proof of concept that this was a viable business model and that it could work. I didn't exactly know for sure if it would work, so I needed to prove to myself that it was something that would work. And I also needed at the time to learn about fashion and learn about what types of brands sold, what types of styles sold well. So it was actually a good thing at the time for me to conservatively build up my inventory. But the reality is that reselling as a business only works at scale. You need volume. You need a lot of active listings at all times. And scaling slowly means that you're spending a lot of time doing the same amount of labor for relatively small returns. If I were starting today, I would rapidly scale up my inventory quickly so that my business would have momentum from the start. And again, this is assuming that you have a baseline of knowledge and you know what types of items will sell. I wouldn't recommend this for someone who's just starting reselling, who's never done it before and doesn't know what types of things sell because you don't want to end up with a bunch of inventory that you can't move. But I do think that scaling quickly would be a good goal if you want reselling to become a primary source of income. The second thing I do differently is how I build systems. Funny enough, my inventory system video is my most popular video on this channel. I believe it has almost 50,000 views, possibly has surpassed that at this point. I know that my inventory system has helped potentially some of you who are watching this video. And while I still think that a lot of what I said in that video and what I shared still stands, I do also now see a lot of opportunities to grow that system and make it even more efficient. At the time, I was spending way too much time on the minutia of the business. For example, I used to track my cost of goods sold on a per item basis. I would go to Goodwill, I would buy 10 items, I would come back home and I would enter all of those 10 items into my inventory tracking system, and I would look at the receipt from Goodwill and I would determine which item was charged which amount. So this shirt was charged $5. I'm going to enter $5 exactly. These jeans were $7. I'm going to enter $7 exactly for each individual item. Now, that way of tracking inventory and cost sounds responsible, but it's actually incredibly labor intensive and I think unnecessary, especially when you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of one-off items. If I were doing this today, I would use something like average costing model. So for example, I would keep just track of a simple two numbers. One is how many items I have in my inventory, and the second is how much I've spent collectively on all of those items as a whole. Let's say I've spent $1,000 on inventory for the year and I have 500 items in my inventory. That means that my average cost of goods per item is $2. It doesn't matter if this dress was $10 and this dress was 50 cents. It just makes things a lot more simple. And I think keeping things simple can help a lot when you're trying to scale a business and grow it. That's just one example of how I would build better systems. But overall, I would just automate more in my spreadsheets, simplify tracking wherever possible, and design systems with the assumption that someday someone else will have to use them. Which brings me to my next point. Third, I would add staff as soon as it made sense. Initially, I did everything myself, which included sourcing, photographing, listing, shipping, storing inventory, keeping track of all of that on a spreadsheet. I did actually eventually hire one person to help me, but it didn't last very long. I think I was just very tentative about whether I really wanted to be investing in labor because profitability was so important to me at the time. I ultimately decided that I didn't want to spend the money on the labor when I could just do it myself. But if the goal is scale, you don't want to be the bottleneck of your own business. And that's definitely what I was. I would hire help to photograph listings, to store them, to help manage inventory, shipping, all of that sort of thing that is super labor intensive as soon as it made viable business sense to do so. And again, that would just free up my time to focus on sourcing better items, making the business decision. Labor is expensive, but so is opportunity cost. Okay, I have two more points to make. Number four, I would focus on building vendor relationships. One of the hardest parts of scaling a reselling business is that every single item you find and source is one of one. This makes scaling incredibly difficult. All of the labor and time that you're putting into getting that one listing up cannot be replicated across other listings. Each listing needs its own series of labor. And this doesn't allow you as a business owner to make any efficiency gains. Whereas if you owned a boutique and you were able to source 20 of the same sweater, then you would just have to list that sweater one time and you'd be able to make 20 sales. Now, I did experiment with wholesale when I was reselling. I tried a couple of different wholesale companies where I bought one box here or there. But if I were starting today, I would go much deeper. And especially now that I have experience working in corporate settings, I kind of understand a little bit behind the scenes of how this kind of thing may work. I feel like I could pick up the phone and call some of these companies and just try to form relationships so that I would be able to get access to inventory on a consistent basis because all of these companies are going to be willing to work with you if you're going to be a repeat buyer. If you form a relationship with someone at the company, you may be able to get a discount if you buy in bulk or if you sign a contract that says I'll buy X number of boxes per month. So I just think I could invest more time into figuring out these wholesale relationships and trying to find ways to source inventory more efficiently so that, again, the bottleneck isn't me and what I'm able to find at my local Goodwill store. That kind of consistency just makes scaling systems and staffing all that much easier as well. And again, that would bring down the total labor cost if I had 20 of the same item and I just need someone to photograph and list it that one time. Number five, my last point for this video, I wouldn't rely on reselling as my only source of income. Reselling is a viable business model. I know because I did it. I was profitable. I made money. Even with systems and staff and finding every possible way you can to scale, there's no way around the fact that it is a very labor intensive business and it's never truly passive income. If I were building this business today, I would be intentional about adding additional streams of income earlier. This could mean YouTube ad revenue, content, education, or even branching into other categories aside from apparel, like electronics or furniture. You can get a higher price per item than you can with most apparel. Diversification takes pressure off of your business, and it also gives you flexibility when the economy shifts. The point is, you never want to rely solely on one thing. So I would try to diversify as much as possible, as quickly as possible, so that I could scale all of those things at the same time. For example, creating a YouTube channel and growing that alongside a reselling business. And kind of going along with this, I would be much more disciplined about cross listing on different platforms, which I did do the first time around, but I wasn't as disciplined about it as I should have been. And now there's tons of different AI tools and other ways that you can manage your listings when they're on different platforms. So I would fully dive into that and make sure that I was maximizing my opportunities to make money. This video is kind of the beginning of a new chapter on this channel. One question that I know some of you are probably asking is, am I still reselling? The short answer is yes, but I'm doing it at a much smaller scale than I was the last time I picked up the camera and posted a video on this page. I still really enjoy it. I've thought about building up my reselling business again much more intentionally with the goal of scaling, like I talk about in this video. But just given my current job and lifestyle, where I live in the city, it just doesn't really make sense for me right now. That said, reselling and secondhand shopping, it's still something that I really care about. And it's still sort of the lens that I use to think about business and entrepreneurship and growing systems at scale. I think if you go on my Poshmark page, you'll see that I have about 20 active listings. I probably won't be growing that to any large number anytime soon, but never say never, because I definitely love it and I could see myself going back to it at any time. Going forward on this channel, I'll be sharing more videos about reselling and entrepreneurship, but through a more analytical lens than I was before. I want to talk about what actually works and why people get stuck, and kind of how to think about these systems at scale and as a whole. If that sounds interesting to you, I would love if you would stick around. Please feel free to subscribe. I plan to post videos about twice a month to start. That's just kind of what's realistic for me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.